Scripture. But I think it's important that we still talk about it. We become refreshed on some things because we don't live in just a Christian world. We live and work and dwell with those who don't see through our eyes. And I want to begin it by using Acts. And what I love about the Acts reading, and for those of you that may not be familiar with Paul's journeys, this was the journey that he had begun when he had the dream about Thessalonica, and someone was there, and the Macedonian calling him to Macedonia. And as he goes through the different towns, he gets positive and negative receptions. And in this one, and he ends up in Athens. And he goes, in Athens at the time was the Greek culture, which was filled with people who loved to discuss ideas. That was their thing. The men would get all dressed up, and they'd go to the Areopagus, and they'd have someone stand in front of them, and that person would throw out a couple of ideas, and then the Greek men would talk about it, discuss it, and perhaps they enjoyed what he said, and they'd have him come back the next day. Well, Paul used that part of the culture to go and begin a conversation about Christianity. And so he goes to the Areopagus, and he stands up and he tells them he wants to talk. And what he gives them is this reading that you had today. He begins to talk to the Greeks, who are a culture of people who believe in many gods, which are not considered to be loving gods, but powerful gods who basically they have to spend their life satisfying. They have to give gifts to them. They have to do things in honor of them. It's a fearful relationship that the Greeks have with their gods. And Paul stands up and he begins to talk about who he is as a Christian. He gives the Greeks the Christian paradigm. Now, many of you know what a paradigm is, but I want to make sure we are on the same page with how I use the word. So here's a couple of ideas about paradigm. A paradigm is the lens by which we look at the world. It is a way of seeing and organizing all this information that comes into us. It's a scaffold which we attach information to build up ideas. And lastly, it actually, because of the scaffolding and how we put ideas into it and shape these ideas and where they should go, it helps us work through confusion and conflict. When something happens in our world, and by the way, that we are being challenged weekly with new ideas and new concepts and how to put things together, the paradigm, our paradigm, helps us to weave through that to see what the truth is and how God would want us to decide. So when I talk about a Christian paradigm, I'm talking about a way of seeing everything that's happening in the world today and looking at it as how it can shape our behavior and the behavior of those that we influence. And by the way, we do influence a lot of people. For us to think that we have no influence is short-sighted. Oh, Pastor Mary, I've retired years ago. I live a very narrow life. Surprisingly, you have influence. You may not recognize it, but you speak out truth at the times, like Tom said, in a way that God would call you to. And so I want to review that paradigm, and I want to use Acts. So, Albert, if you could bring Acts up again. The Acts that's on the board is from the NIV version, the New International Version. The Acts I'm going to read to you is from the English Standard Version. The New International was a 1970-80 translation of the Greek. There's been a lot of scholarship since then, and the ESV is a newer translation, more conservative. And the NIV is what we call dynamic. The people that translated it with, well, maybe it thinks, it could be like this, let's put it like that, where the ESV is a little bit closer to the Greek translations. So I just want to read it again, and I'm going to bring it apart. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he actually is not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being. So let's take that apart. So the very first thing that we want to look at is the thing about Christianity is that we believe one thing, that God has made heaven and earth. It has to stand in us. However we believe that, it has to stand in us because there's so much that flows from that message. He has made heaven and earth. Everything we see and experience, whatever is part of our physical realm, we believe has been given to us by the Lord. And what he has created has been good. However, we also know as part of our paradigm that sin entered the world. And so that what we see today is only a shadow of the good that he has for us. That the world, and even in the physical realm, is deteriorating in such a way that it's not the pleasant that God designed when he originally created. The second thing that we want to go through is the second part of that verse, which says, God, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything. The second thing about our paradigm is that we have to know that unlike the gods that Paul like the gods of the culture that Paul was talking to, our God doesn't need us. He has no desire. He has no need of us serving him, giving him gifts. He created us and he created the good things of the world completely without any need for it to return anything to him. But he desires that we share in his love, that we love him and look at him, and that he shares his love with us. It's kind of a gift that we have to reach out for, and he gives us. But the physical reality is that because he doesn't need us, he's beyond what we see. He's beyond the biggest nebulas and the black holes and everything of the universe. He's beyond that. This is part of his creation. This isn't defining him. The universe doesn't define him. The physical realm doesn't define him. We don't define him. He, in a sense, defines himself. He has no need of the temples that we build for him. That he is self-sufficient and wonderful. And he created freely as an expression of himself for no other reason than to share love. And so we believe in a God who's created everything, and the center of that creation and the motive of that creation is love. That's an important paradigm. That's an important way of viewing the physical world. The third thing is that God himself has given to mankind, humanity, breath and life and good things. John's Gospel, the third or fourth verse of John's Gospel, says, all things came into being through him, and apart from him not one thing came into being that has come into being. And I love this verse. In him was life, and life was the light of humanity. And so unlike the world paradigm, our God created and breathed life and good things into us. There is a celebration of humanity that we speak about in the Christian paradigm, that humanity is been raised up beyond the other creation for special purposes. When we review Genesis 1 and 2, we see that God said, he created the animals on the sixth day out of, by the way, what did he create the animals out of? Dirt. Okay, so he created the animals out of the dirt, and then he said, I want to create humanity. He's going to create man. And by the way, what did he create humans out of? The dirt. Does it surprise you then that we share DNA with animals? We're kind of created out of the same substrate, aren't we? So that should not be a big revelation or any kind of a push into the Christian paradigm when you hear someone say, oh, but do you know this particular jellyfish has the same DNA as you have? I could see that. Sure, I can. It has absolutely no bearing on me other than the fact that it proves Genesis, that we were all created out of the same substrate. But the animals and the fish and the birds and all of the flora, they were not created with this one purpose, and that is God said, I'm going to create humanity in my image. In my image. What is the image of God? We long ago I did a sermon on the Imago Dei, but the image of God is one that is of companionship and sharing and love and generosity and joy and peace. And the human was created for that purpose. And they were also created to name the animals, to have authority over the animals, and to care for the animals and to care for the plants. In the Christian paradigm, we are called caretakers of the physical realm. That we use our heart and our mind and our soul to care for what God has created because it's good. When we as Christians fail to care, then we're sending the wrong message about what we really believe. We need to care. And we need to be able to express that in a way that doesn't push us into another paradigm, but rather expresses the fullness of what we believe right from the beginning of what it is to be a Christian. So we have responsibility for creation, we cultivate the garden, and we are companions. God walked and talked in the garden in the cool of the day with his creation. Where are you, Adam? He called out as he walked in the cool of the day. That is our intended relationship with God, to walk and talk with him, and to walk and talk with each other in pleasant circumstances. The goodness of God's creation can as we think about it, God of wonders beyond the galaxy. I mean, when we start to really look at creation, it absolutely amazes us. It never shakes us. The more I studied biology, the more I studied the cell, the more I studied genetics, the more I became a Christian. And you all know that I was that evolutionary biologist. I was an atheist, and I moved to Christianity as I kept seeing some things just don't work in that paradigm that I was seeing. There are so many phenomenal, wonderful things about the human body, about creation, that leads us all back to loving God. But we live in a world that doesn't share this paradigm, and I want to explain to you how the conflict works and how unfolding from these other paradigms, we get caught up into a wash of things that we need to have clarity about. The world, the non-Christian paradigm, is that the world is a mechanistic process. In other words, through all sorts of physical processes and in natural ways, the world and what you see came to be. And we live in a world that is intrinsically related synergistically. In other words, we share the world. A long time ago, if you're old enough to remember this, we used to call it Spaceship Earth. We share the world with all of the other processes that have arisen through evolutionary means. And so therefore we are one of many sharing this planet. And therefore, with that in mind, humanity is not raised up over the other things that occupy the spaces of the world. Humanity, you see, is complex, and we understand that, and we have certain abilities which give us even more responsibility to know how to share spaces with the other creatures of the world. So therefore we have protection of species, correct? Because we are protecting them because we have to share space with them. By the way, I'm not opposed to that. Many of you know that when I taught biology, I came to a point where I had to stop doing dissections because I could see that it wasn't the intended purpose of dissections was to help students become more familiar with systems, especially the human system, but it was just a wanton killing of animals. There were so many better ways of showing students that, and so I began to stop doing dissections, and I kind of moved over to the what we call virtual world of biology, and I found it was so much more effective. Because I felt, I don't feel that it's important. I don't think it's good to kill animals. I like to see them protected. But the conflict comes when we protect an animal over a human. In the world, that isn't a conflict. You see, in the world, because they think that humans just overpopulate. And so therefore, it really isn't quite the same thing. That when we're faced with the destruction of habitat, then the problem is the baby in the womb. You see, there's too many of them. And so they're easy to remove because they don't put much of a fight. And so when we look at poverty and the use of resources, in the world's view, it's, well, we have to share resources, and if you have too many children, you're kind of really overusing your portion of resources. So it would be best for you to think about eliminating the next one, or not putting boundaries on you. And in fact, in some cultures, if you're going to have a female child, they're not really going to be important to our culture. So we don't see those as being necessary to live. And that caused China to eliminate 346 million girls over the last 40 years. The world's way of thinking, into their mind, is a rational way of living out their paradigm of shared use. We don't have ZPG anymore, by the way. It's called People Connection. And they want a lot of funding so that they can go into small indigenous communities stricken with poverty and cure the poverty problem. And I need you to hear this. Cure the poverty problem by killing the child in the womb. You will never cure poverty by killing the child in the womb. You will only cure poverty by healing the system. And that's hard to do. So they take the easy way out. So that's why when we look at these shared resources and we look at the people that are doing that, you have to understand they are absolutely wedded to these solutions. And because they're so wedded to these solutions, they cannot understand where you come from, and you celebrate life. You see, the elderly can now use up more resources than they're supposed to use up. They really don't, they're not productive, and we don't really have a very long lifespan. So if they're going to portion out medical care, why should we partial out medical care to you if you're elderly? It doesn't make sense with the use of resources. You hear how it's flowing? Oh, how about the disabled? They really don't, contribute much to this society. They take up space. And so we really don't want to see them take up more space and use up resources. In the Netherlands, they have a euthanasia program. You probably know that, correct? The statistics came out, they euthanized 600, almost 700 infants because the infants were declared by authorities to have lives that were of poor quality. God says all life is quality. The disabled life can live a quality life. The disabled infant can live a quality life. An elderly person can live. I thank God I have never met as many wise people in a church as I've met in this church, who share their life, who share their wisdom, who share prayers, who share their faith in such a way that it brings life to me. I love being around, and I'm getting in that camp. So I'm hoping you're loving being around me, young people. So because we have wisdom, we cut through the red tape. We don't really have to be confused about things. I thank God for what an elderly person does. I thank God for the influence that they have today. And I thank God that we have laws and protections for the elderly, the disabled. I've had so many friends with disabled children, and it has bring joy to their life. To begin to see this new push where the disabled or the elderly or anybody weak or unable to produce or live what they, by who decides that, live a quality of life, should be eliminated and not use the resources. Can you understand how all of these things are flowing from that now? But we say no. What God created was good. And so we uphold it and we love it and we push back. But we as a church need to go a little bit further on our own way now. Because we need to see that the world needs us. Because they are like the blind. Sam Shoemaker said the blind who are trying to find the doorway. And they're doing the best they can. And they're feeling their way on that wall. Where's the door? Where is it open? How will this ever make sense to me? We can take their hand and lead them into the truth. You see, that's what's really important about not disdaining the world, not disdaining those around us that have these views, but rather realizing that we have light. The light that guides us can help guide them. They're blinded to the light that's in you. They're blinded to the light in the world. But you can take their hand and you can help them touch the wall and help them find the handle and open the door. That's what our role is. That's why we can never stop engaging in evangelism. We have a mission church because we believe, and we come to a warehouse because it's a boots on the ground church. Our purpose is not coming here making ourselves feel good in a wonderfully decorated and beautifully appointed building, but rather it's to come to remind us that we have a purpose to go into the world from what we gather here and the love and the nourishment that we get from each other, to go out there and take a blind hand and lead them somewhere on the wall so they can find the doorway and the light can come into them. They make sense to themselves, but when they can finally see what makes sense to us, they are redeemed and reformed. Lest they find God, that they may find God, even though he's not far away. Because in him we live and move and have our being. And in that, they also live and move and have their being in him. So the greatest news about Spirit of Life is that we believe with all of our heart that we're in a training mode. And I love it when Richard was pointing out what his brother said, pray for revival. That is exactly what the Lord said to me last week. If you say anything to the church, tell them to get prepared, step it up. There are many people out there walking around blindly, following other blind people who are wanting to, who are wanting to see the light. And when they see the light about the elderly, and they see the light about the unborn, and when they see the light about the disabled, there becomes in them a passion to save. They become people that we can follow because they've seen it the other way. And so today, in the sanctity of life, my encouragement to you is to share your faith this week with someone. Share what God has told you about living as a child of God, that it was good and people are good and everyone is worthy of respect. Everyone is worthy of respect because we image the Lord Almighty. I've gone a little bit over our time, and so I want to just take a moment now and just pray with you. I understand this was a hard to hear sermon. I really do. And I appreciate your willingness. But don't let the uncomfortableness of the sermon or what I've said to you try to flake it off. Try actually to ask the Lord, please allow me to be used this week so that I might help someone whose eyes have been so clouded over by mistaken thinking. Or if you were in AA, we could call it stinking thinking. That I can maybe help them see the light. So that's what I want to pray for. And if that's something that you can pray for right now, if that's something that you feel that you could do this week, I want you to bow your head and pray with me. Lord, just one person I ask for, that you would allow me to share my faith with one person. The life-giving and breathing faith that you have given me, I pray that I can give away this week. And I pray as I give it away, that they can hear the truth of who you are, and they can see the way you want us to live. Prepare my heart, Lord, that I may hear you speak to me, and give me the words that I may speak to others. You're calling us, Lord, to a new level, and allow me, Lord, to experience that this week. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.